In this video, we're going to look at how we will be approaching the first 50 boxes of the 250 box challenge. So if you're watching this, I assume you've already watched the video that introduces what the challenge is about, what purpose it serves, and so forth, and that you've gone through lessons 0 and 1 of the course already. Our first 50 are going to involve drawing freely rotated boxes using the Y method, just as we did in the organic perspective exercise, with the addition of drawing through our boxes as though we have X-ray vision. But there's one key difference. Where in the organic perspective exercise we never actually defined where our vanishing points would be, for these first 50, we will be drawing explicit vanishing points on the page, just to get us used to focusing on how our edges converge, before taking those training wheels away once again. Let's get started. You should already be familiar with this process, as it's the core of the Y method we introduced in lesson 1. The central point at which all 3 of the Y's arms meet will represent the corner of the box that is closest to the viewer, with each of the 3 arms extending off that corner in one of the 3 dimensions of our box. One will define the width, one will define the height, and another will define the depth. Though these terms are for our purposes here just used to differentiate them from one another. They're all interchangeable, so it doesn't matter which is which. Keep in mind that these arms don't need to be the same length, and the relationship between their lengths will impact the rotation of the resulting box. For the purposes of what we're doing in this challenge, we're not going in with any specific intent as to how the box should be rotated. Rather, we're exploring how these ways in which the process can be changed impacts the resulting box and how it sits in space. So, when drawing your Y, intentionally try to play with different lengths for the different arms, as well as rotating the Y differently so you don't simply end up with the exact same box drawn over and over. That would seriously undermine the effectiveness of the exercise, because it'd result in your brain going on autopilot rather than actively thinking about every choice and action you're taking. Lastly, keep in mind that the angle between the arms should be at least 90 degrees to avoid things getting a little wacky and distorted. In those exercises that use concrete vanishing points from lesson 1, we always started with the vanishing points first, then drew our boxes. Here, we've started with the Y, and in this second step, we're going to be placing a vanishing point somewhere along the path each arm defines. So, if we take a look at this arm, we can see that it points in this direction. We can place our vanishing point anywhere along that path, although for the first 50, we'll be ensuring that they're close enough to still be on the page itself, which will result in more rapid convergence and dramatic foreshortening. For this line, we'll place our vanishing point here, but again, we're choosing an arbitrary location along this path. We're not finding the correct point because no such location exists. As long as it's in line with the arm of the Y, you're good. And of course, we'll do the same with the other 2. One thing to consider, since we're going to be drawing 5 or 6 of these per page, is that it can get very confusing as to which vanishing point is which. We don't want to have to keep all our vanishing points super close to the boxes, which would theoretically make this issue easier to work with, because that would really restrict us to extremely foreshortened boxes. Instead, it might be a good idea to use different kinds of marks for each different box. You might use a little X for one box's vanishing points, a little circle for another's, and so forth. Here we're really just repeating the same process from the Y method video, so I'm not going to go into too much detail about it here. The key consideration is that, like in the rough perspective exercise, we are trying to ensure that all of our edges converge towards one of our defined vanishing points. Ghosting all the way back to the vanishing points is fine, so feel free to do it to give yourself the best chance of settling on an edge that is oriented correctly. Just remember, when resolving our corners, we don't commit to our edges immediately. We lay down a tentative point first, then look at the edges coming to that corner from the other directions to lay down a few more points before settling on where we're actually going to place our final corner and drawing our edges. And of course, another big difference from how we tackled constructing boxes in the organic perspective exercise is that here we will actually be drawing through our boxes, meaning each corner will be where 3 edges meet rather than just 2, with one of the edges being visible through the box as though we have X-ray vision. This helps us to better understand how the whole box sits in 3 dimensions, rather than just on the 2 dimensions of the flat page. We will also be drawing through our boxes when doing the organic perspective exercise as part of our warm-ups going forward. This step should end with your box being complete, and you can add hatching lines to one of the planes that face the viewer to help clarify which side is which, since drawing through our boxes can make that a little confusing. If you're unsure which plane to add hatching to, it'll be your choice of any of the 3 which touch the central point of the Y we started with. And remember, don't be sloppy with your hatching lines. If you choose to add them, then be sure to put actual effort into applying them to the best of your ability. For each box, write the number of that box beside it. We've seen a wide variety of strategies for numbering them, but the only one that's really ever made sense to us is to simply write a number from 1 to 250 corresponding to which box it is in the whole set beside the box. Fortunately, this is what most students do by default, but we're stating it here more explicitly for those who may be inclined to try other options. Prior to this update to the material, we didn't ask for the dates to be recorded, but we have definitely been in plenty of situations where knowing how many boxes a student drew in a given day helps us to judge, in combination with other factors, whether the student is pacing themselves appropriately or if they might be rushing. When writing the date, we will do so as a number, first the 4 digits of the year, then the 2 digits of the month, and the 2 digits of the day. If all or most of the boxes share the same date, having been drawn on the same day, you can just put that date at the top of the page and note the specific date for any boxes that weren't drawn that day beside the given box's number. You'll be going through this whole process 5 or 6 times per page, assuming you're working with standard A4 or 8.5 inch by 11 inch printer paper. It's important that you avoid drawing your boxes too small, so don't try and keep large distances between your boxes. Additionally, it's important to accept that you're going to end up with boxes on one end of the page with vanishing points on the other end and other boxes in between. That's simply inevitable if we're going to make efficient use of the page and avoiding drawing so small that it actually starts undermining the exercise. The final step for each page is to extend our lines away from the viewer just as we did in the rough perspective exercise to test how far off our estimates were from converging with the vanishing points. Ideally, we do this with 3 pens of different colors. I find Sharpie's colored pen sets to be very useful for this, as they're pretty cheap and more widely available than any other brand of fine liner, but the specifics don't matter so much here. You can use ballpoint pens, colored pencils as long as they're kept sharp so the line is clear and thin, really anything that lets you make a mark that can be distinguished from the original line work of the box. Having 3 different colors helps in distinguishing the different sets of lines, but if for whatever reason that's not possible, it's okay to work with just one color for your line extensions. Grab a ruler and line it up with one end of the central point of your starting Y, such that it runs down the length of one of the arms. This allows us to use the Y to very easily identify which direction is pointing away from the viewer, since the central point of the Y denotes the corner closest to the viewer. With your ruler aligned correctly, draw along it past the vanishing point. If you're working with different colors, be sure to use one color for all those intended to converge towards the same vanishing point. Do this for all the boxes on the page, and once you're finished, it's likely that you'll find most, if not all of your lines don't converge perfectly to their set vanishing points. That's perfectly normal, but it does mean that you may need to make small adjustments to how you're approaching planning out your boxes and resolving those corners in order to shrink those margins of error. That is ultimately the purpose of this challenge as a whole. It's not to draw any perfect boxes, It's to improve our ability to have a bunch of lines converge consistently, or as consistently as possible, to the same point. This isn't something you'll master after just 250 boxes, but it is something that if you approach it intentionally, if you reflect on the analysis we're performing here and factor it into how you approach the next page, will improve. One thing to consider is to actually leave this step for just before you want to start your next page of boxes. Meaning, if you drew a page of boxes one day and weren't going to start the next page until the following day, it'd be better to do your line extensions for page 1 on day 2. That way, the analysis will be fresh in your mind and you can act on it more readily than if you'd done the extensions the previous day. That about covers it. You should now be good to start on the first 50 boxes of the challenge, and when you're done, you can come back to check out the next video on how you'll be tackling the next 50. Good luck, and remember, pace yourself. This is not a sprint, and not something you're going to be grinding through. Be sure to balance it out with the 50% rule as explained in Lesson 0, and be reasonable with your expectations of how quickly you're going to be getting through all of this.